welcome to another episode of Alma Ensemble's summer interview series. I am Michelle Smith-Johnson. We also have Sarah Wardle-Jones with us.
Hello.
And Erica Sipes.
Hello.
We are Alma Ensemble, a chamber music collective based in Roanoke, Virginia. You guys, we are thrilled to have Elizabeth Joy Roe here with us today. Elizabeth is a pianist and a partner with Greg Anderson in the Billboard chart-topping, Emmy-nominated Anderson and Roe piano duo. And she is also a solo pianist and an incredible advocate for music in our world. Liz, welcome. How are you?
Oh my goodness. Thank you, Michelle. And thank you, all the wonderful ladies of Alma Ensemble. I am so happy to be here today. And I just want to let the three of you know, and all of the powerful women artists, creatives watching, that you are all doing such important work, not only in the classical music industry, but just in society. I know that we have incredible performers here who commission new music over time, but who also are working in the public schools and doing just essential community engagement. And, you know, these are not normal times. And so I'm in complete admiration and awe. And finally, I love the name Alma. I love the multiple meanings, obviously, the shout out to Alma Mahler, but also just the meaning, anything I think as artists we should be doing with soul. So I think that that's a beautiful moniker.
Very cool. Thank you so much. That's so nice.
Feel goods all around is
awesome. Yeah.
We're gotta so find happy. Those glimmers of light when we can during these times.
Exactly. Absolutely. And it's so nice to be together again. It's been a while since we've done a recording, and you know, being in quarantine, Sarah and Eric and I, even living in the same city, haven't seen each other very much recently, especially. So this is
amazing,
a much needed treat for everyone today. Thank you for being with us.
My pleasure.
So Liz, I'm going to kick off the questions. Obviously, I've known you for a while from a distance, but I'm a huge fan, as you know. And was it 2 weekends ago now? You did, yeah. You and Greg undertook this absolutely amazing, I don't even know what you call it. Well, you called it an extravaganza.
Yes.
And it truly was. And it was through the Portland Piano Festival, which is an awesome organization, and they do such great presentations. But what I thought you did was just like out of this world amazing. Because you were so creative, which you always are. You were inclusive of young and old, professionals, students, everything. And you were having to work in this environment, which, yes, you do videos and you do editing and all that, but I felt like you went even beyond that. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, how it came to be? Because I know you were supposed to perform for them in March or something like that, right? So what happened to make this all happen? What was it like? Anything you want to say about that whole experience?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Erica. I can attest to the fact that you are one of our favorite followers on Twitter and on social media. You're just always engaged, and you're like the ideal audience member for us, someone who's passionate about music, but also open-minded about the ways in which classical music can be shared with, you know, wider audiences. So everything, you know, kind of felt like it virtually turned upside down back in March. And we had been on tour, actually. We were in Arizona about to play a show in Scottsdale and found out that that show got canceled. We arrived in Scottsdale for a rehearsal and found out that everything was shutting down. And the next concert following, it would have been the next day after Scottsdale, would have been the weekend of Portland piano concerts. And so we were supposed to have 2 recitals in Portland. And it's, as you said, it's a distinguished organization. The curator for last season was our dear friend and pianist extraordinaire, Marc-Andre Hamelin. And so, you know, we were super excited. We had two ambitious programs. Brahms was sort of at the crux of both programs. And when we found out that it was canceled, you know, we went our separate ways. Greg and I are bi-coastal, so we have not seen each other since literally like March 11. And so we, you know, kind of assumed that everything was going to be postponed, canceled indefinitely. But Portland had rescheduled the concerts for August. So that was back in March. And at the time, I imagine all of you also were probably thinking like, oh, it's going to go back to normal in August. And now we're learning that that's very far from the truth. And so when we were kind of revisiting our late summer plans, Portland came back to us and said that they were not planning on postponing again, just because it's sort of sold all the tickets for both events and they don't want to keep delaying it. You know, now in retrospect, I'm seeing a lot of my colleagues going on planes. Obviously, there's a lot of fear and anxiety because, you know, people are trying to take precautions for traveling, but, you know, people also have to work. But at the time, we decided that traveling wouldn't be a feasible option because we're on separate coasts. You know, we wouldn't have the option of just driving to like someone's city or going to a Steinway gallery and live streaming it, or even live streaming it from one of our homes. And so, you know, Greg and I are always used to kind of being light on our toes, adapting to situations and finding ways to explore creativity within constraints. Actually, constraints often are the impetus for what we've created, actually for the shaping of our entire career. Neither of us had planned to be, you know, part of a piano duo. So that was all sort of serendipity. So, you know, along those lines, when we were told, okay, these events are going to go forward, we put together a proposal. We're like, let's try to put something that is a live streamed event that's virtual, but it feels like it captures the elements and the spirit of a live in-person event. And so that's why we found it essential that there would be interactivity, that there would be almost like this local community element. We wanted to pay tribute to our host city, which was Portland, and Portland happens to be one of our favorite places anyway. So that was super easy. But also this fact that, you know, it's been really beautiful and humbling and inspiring to see artists in every genre sort of like playing straight from their living rooms or their piano rooms or bedrooms or whatever. But we wanted it to feel a bit more heightened than that, you know, like instead of us just being in like our sweats or something coming in, you know, like live from our homes, because it was ticketed and if people are actually going to pay for this, it should feel like an experience. So we had to do two things because we couldn't really play together because of latency. And I know that you've probably tried. It's just, I mean, being kind of separated by thousands of miles, like doesn't help our case, but also it just, you know, with two piano synchronicity, it's so much harder than if you're playing maybe with strings or when there's a little bit more forgiveness with the attack. And so we're like, let's not even bother trying to play like these traditional two piano pieces or even our arrangements, but it actually led to the creation of a sort of back and forth call and response piece that dealt with latency. So we can kind of almost like be one-upping each other without playing together. And then obviously one of our passions, which is create music videos. We actually, at the beginning of the pandemic or time in quarantine, we had edited this music video called Hallelujah Variations based on Leonard Cohen's song Hallelujah that seemed to speak to the times. You know, there was something about the poignancy and the message of that video and of our composition and of the message of Cohen's song that just seemed to fit the moment. And so we were already kind of in that mode of creating videos anyway. But what happened for Portland was we actually kind of bit off more than we could chew. We were staying up, almost pulling all-nighters like the week leading up to the event because we ended up premiering, I think it was about 10 new music videos that were all like created, filmed, edited, you know, over the span of the summer, essentially. And then also, I think it was 6 brand new arrangements for piano duo that we had to like learn separately, you know, record on our own, film, all that stuff, edit, because, you know, we're sort of a two-person operation, although we give a shout out to our wonderful assistant Jasmine, who works where Greg is, and also our husbands, because just having the patience of like, oh, can you help like set up this interesting lighting situation, or like that, all that stuff, you kind of have to use what you have, and obviously we we're able to order things, but it was a really kind of harried but also exhilarating operation, because what this time in quarantine has taught us is that we're all sort of learning together, and that the most essential and crucial thing is that we are sharing and connecting, that we are connecting with others. We're using music, the essence of the music, to uplift and heal and just find ways to communicate with each other, even when we're distanced and even when we were apart. And so that was sort of the underlying motivation for these events. And we're open to potentially doing more, obviously because the future looks so uncertain, but in any case, we think that there's a lot of potential with just this online environment, that there are just wonderful ways to reach out to people on the other side of the globe. And it's even more powerful now because everybody, across the world is dealing with this crisis almost in simultaneity, which kind of makes it this rarity. It's like we all can kind of latch onto similar feelings of confusion and anxiety, but also like an awareness of what really matters.
Yeah, for sure. It's been incredibly challenging to navigate this time as an artist. It seems like you guys are doing a phenomenal job. This is a sort of an aside. Do you feel like the emotions of this journey have ebbed and flowed, or do you feel like you have been like staying the course for the most part?
Absolutely. I would say the former. I mean, I can't speak for Greg because, we're two very different people. We have different circumstances. Actually, his husband is an emergency physician. So he's actually saving lives and dealing with COVID, like just straightforward, in a straightforward way. So, I know that there's a lot of kind of fear and stress related to that. And that was
Sure.
another reason that we decided not to travel, because it's just, there's too many risks. But for me personally, and I would say it's almost like the combination for being an artist, being a woman, being a person in her 30s, like just a lot of kind of grappling with sort of like what my priorities are, and what are the things that really, as I said, that really matter. Because like when it first happened, I remembered I was sort of in that kind of like Virgo, like that's my sign, like that Virgo mode of like, let me write this list of things I'm going to do like during, because I thought it was only going to be like a month or two. So I was like, oh, I'm going to like read like 5 books, and I'm going to, like start like learning this language. Like I just kind of like wrote all these things because I almost felt like it was this weird, like, not like vacation, but just like a weird break, and so that I was going to sort of leap in and do all that stuff. And then I realized, and actually at the front end of the pandemic, I was like pretty active. I'm part of an ensemble here in New York called Dakota. And so we did these Dakota at Dusk sessions. Members of the group would do sort of these live streamed like mini concerts from home. And so I did that early in October, in April. And obviously Greg and I were working on the music video. So I kind of felt like I was sort of in a productive zone, and also looking forward to taking on things, projects or hobbies that I wouldn't normally have the time for. And then I remember I feeling actually this weird sense of this kind of like the conflict between productivity and wanting to rest, and almost feeling like I just like can't, like I don't want to do anything, but then the anxiety of like, what if like when this is over, I'm going to look back and feel like I wasted all this time. And then obviously the anxieties over like not making any money and things being canceled, and just dealing with the new normal. But I have to say, like at this phase in my career, I feel less, in a way, there was a weird sense of relief because I've been on the hamster wheel for, I would say it's been a full decade or more of just touring constantly. And, you know, I see a lot of my colleagues are sort of feeling like, I can't wait to get back like on the road or like get back on stage. And in a way, like, I feel like my identity isn't so much wrapped into that. Like, I feel like if I'm doing something creative and if I am, you know, finding new ways to explore and experiment and work with music and work with just creativity in general, then I'll be okay. You know, it's like, I don't necessarily need the, like, I don't need the audience. I don't need the applause. I don't need the kind of the adrenaline of life on the road, but that could also just be where I am in my life. Like, there was almost like this sense of, let me kind of cherish this time. Like, I feel like now I'm in the place of sort of cherishing this stasis, if you will, and really like sitting with the feelings that come through, almost treating it like a kind of mindfulness exercise. Like, there's something very meditative about the spaciousness of things not being constantly scheduled, and surrendering to the fact that we can't control and plan as much as, you know, maybe we'd like to. So there is a weird freedom. And obviously, like, I also feel extremely privileged that I'm not, you know, an essential worker, that I have to be kind of putting myself in danger, and that I can actually take a bit of a rest. So I do like acknowledge that, but it's been an up and down vacillating journey for me.
That I'm really glad we talked about that, because it's so true. I don't know. I feel like I'm coming coming back to the light after a period of like just the slump.
Oh yeah.
And so, and that's
Totally.
real. And I think if we normalize that and talk about it, then in a healthy space for musicians, artists, as women, then we can more readily support each other. I think too often women are, they go into hiding or don't talk about it because that brings shame, or, you know,
absolutely,
the sort of stigma that not necessarily goes with mental illness, but, you know, well, I guess it does accompany mental illness in some people's headspace, but I'm glad we talked about it.
No, and I mean, just to kind of wrap that up, or it's an ongoing conversation. I think as artists, as musicians, we need to be vulnerable. We need to really open up our eyes and our minds and our hearts and our souls, you know, to all that this life experience entails, not just the joys and not just the excitement and the inspiration, but also like times of suffering or times of depression or times of sadness. And, you know, the more we run away from it, the more problems will sort of emerge later. So I do think that, like, literally taking moments just to breathe, like to meditate for 5 minutes, to take a nap, you know, it's like things that, you know, we're, as sort of a society, and, you know, not to generalize, but I think a lot of our sort of self-worth and in classical music is sort of tied to productivity, and like, we have to be doing these things, and we have to be, you know, playing these concerts and getting these reviews and blah, 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 you know, and like be connecting and doing all this entrepreneurial thing. And I feel like that's a little bit toxic, that message, like that, because we're not giving ourselves space to just be. And that's where real creativity emerges from, that place of just presence, you know? And so that I've been really like trying to embrace during this period.
That's so good. That's so healthy. Way to go. Way to go.
Way to go to you guys. So too.
Hey.
Solidarity.
Yeah. Everybody's making their own way at this point. So sort of to put our therapy session on hold for a second, because I could talk about this all day.
Yeah, me too.
Let's go back to the beginning. Like, what brought you to the piano? What sort of your career trajectory, I guess, I'm assuming from childhood, to bring you to where you are today? If you would give us sort of a broad strokes.
Sure. Yeah. And
life of
Liz I don't want to take
situation.
forever, so I'll try to, you know, be as summarizing as possible. So I was born and raised in the Chicago suburbs, and my parents neither of them are musicians, but they're music lovers. And I feel kinship with the three of you because I have two sisters. I'm like one of three girls. I'm the middle child. And so my older sister just to kind of give context, like she's 11 years my senior, and she was already quite serious taking violin lessons. And my mom, when she was actually a teenager, won awards for choral conducting and also played violin. And then she ended up getting her fine arts, her bachelor's degree in fine arts. So she's a visual artist. So, and then my dad, you know, kind of funny stories. Like I remember in childhood, he would have friends, you know, come over and they would have like the karaoke thing on the TV. You know, like my parents are from South Korea. So it's like, that's such a Korean, it's like one of the most Korean things about me. It's like, I love karaoke, or as we say, noraebang. So, you know, and he would always sing really well. So I remember like from as early as I can remember, there was always music, you know, but not just classical music. I mean, it'd be oldies. Like I grew up listening, you know, I'm a child of the 80s and 90s. So I kind of grew up listening to the oldie station. The Beatles, like, is one of my favorite bands of all time since like the age of 6 or 7. And you know, cartoons, like there were these Garfield cartoons and Gem. I don't know if you ever watched Gem. If you're like, it was like this rock band, and it was like Gem had like pink hair and this alter ego. Like it was a little like adult, but I remember like we had the dolls and like I was so into it. But the fact was like there were all these cassette tapes that actually had like all the music. So there were like these kind of like sort of girl band like pop like songs. And so my younger sister is less than 2 years younger than me. So we basically grew up doing kind of everything together. We would be singing like duet versions of the Gem songs, of Garfield cartoons, and then like eventually the Beatles. And so the classical music thing, I think there was a lot had to do with my older sister because she was taking violin lessons. My first instrumental foray was on the violin. I started violin lessons when I was 5.5, and remember just viscerally not liking it. Just squeaky, squawky, like the stickers on the fingerboard, and just like, So when I was 6, I actually started taking lessons with Mrs. Jones, who was kind of your, I don't know, like the iconic neighborhood piano teacher with the cats, and like very, very kindly. And so it was like very modest. Like it wasn't like my parents didn't have this, you know, tiger parent mentality, which I'm very grateful for. Like it's not like, okay, you're going to start, you know, at the age of 3 and then like start practicing, you know, 3 hours a day. Like it wasn't like that. So I started piano lessons and immediately fell in love. And one of the things I love about Mrs. Jones was one of her first assignments to me was to create my own piece of music. So essentially to kind of improvise my own thing. And that was, it just seemed to open up this realm of possibility. I had already been an avid drawer and colorer. Like I just love the visual arts and expressing myself that way. I was also very quiet, and like I was like the goody two shoes, like good girl, you know, so like quiet, docile, like did well in school, you know, like, but there was something about piano that almost seemed to open up this door to a place of wondrous possibility, like a place where I could explore and make things of my own. And then eventually, kind of as I was growing older, like into my teen years, in a conduit for expression, somewhere where I could actually kind of express angst or express yearning or all that stuff, you know, when you're in that sort of puberty time when you're kind of dealing with feelings, and me being like a good girl and always like studious and, you know, just not a rebel on the surface, but kind of having curiosity and, you know, being a sensitive person, like being able to kind of channel that through music. So anyway, so it just felt like a natural fit. And like for sort of the trajectory in terms of like how I kind of advanced, from the local piano teachers, I went to audition for Emilio Del Rosario's studio. He was kind of like Chicago's version of Dorothy DeLay, if that makes sense. You know, like this impresario in Chicago where he would have all of these students who won like the MTNA competitions and the Kosciuszko Chopin Foundation competition. Like they would just win kind of national awards, or even, you know, I don't know, I would see them play with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra on PBS, you know, stuff like that. So we heard about him. We did the hour drive to Winnetka, Illinois, and I auditioned for him. I was 8 years old, and I remember the first sort of program that I auditioned with was, this is very signature of even me now. There was like a Bach like piece, a romantic piece, like maybe this a piece by Schumann or something, and then like a really easy version of Yesterday. Like I don't know, there's like a Beatles song, obviously. So that's like, it was a precursor for things to come. So he accepted me. And I would say like from that moment forward, my progress was sort of exponential because a few things. Like he was a very effective teacher. He had a big studio, but he kind of knew how to tailor his style to each student. And he was known for being kind of intense and like if you would get impatient, like he would show it. But with me, because I was like such a good girl, like he was always like very kind to me, but he pushed me in the sense that like he would keep giving me kind of repertoire that like I remember being 10 and seeing the Liszt Un Sospiro etude and looking at the score and listening to like this Louis Lortie recording and being like, I don't think I can do this. But the fact that he was sort of like, okay, like bring this in, you know, learn it. Like he just sort of he made me expand sort of the realm of possibility. Whereas like if I were just with another teacher or just maybe on my own, I would give up, you know? And so I think that sort of motivation was important. But then the other element was being surrounded by talented peers who were my age or a little bit older that seemed aspirational. You know, when I would watch them play in the weekend workshop recitals or, you know, kind of with studio class. And so those two elements, I think, were integral to my development. And then on the side, I became obsessed with a lot of sort of music documentaries, and on PBS they would show the Tchaikovsky competition or the Van Cliburn competitions. I remember I literally watched the 1993 Van Cliburn competition on tape or whatever like 100 times. And like the funny thing is like my sisters and I were all into it, and we knew like all the competitors' names. We're like, oh my gosh, I loved when he played that in semifinal. Like it was like we nerded out, like it was crazy. so then just being inspired by that, listening to recordings. I also remember seeing Murray Pariah give a recital at Orchestra Hall or Symphony Center in Chicago, and like realize I was 8 I think. And I remember I saw him and I was like, that's what I want to do. So basically by the time I was 10, I knew that I wanted to be a concert pianist. And then in terms of professional development, you know, I kind of did the local competitions, but the kind of big turning point was when I was 13. I entered this competition kind of on a whim, and it was in Sicily, called the Ibla Grand Prize. And it basically had like many different levels, and I entered kind of the youth sort of level, which youth actually went up to like age 23. So it was still, it basically kind of like went through college age, and then there was like the adult professional level. And I actually I was awarded the grand prize of that young division. And so that was a really seminal moment because it put me on kind of an international sort of sphere in terms of, you know, meeting the jury, meeting other musicians from around the world. But it also kind of validated that I was on the right path in terms of, you know, my musical development and also the blessedness of youth. Like I wouldn't say that I ended up being the optimal competition pianist, you know, as an adult. Like I feel like my competition sort of victory phase was like my teen years, and then you know, it's sort of because I think you have this sort of, there's almost like this intrepid quality of youth. You're just not aware of all the things that could go wrong, and you kind of you're not overthinking it. And so I think that really served in my favor. But kind of logistically, that prize gave me the opportunity to play at Steinway Hall, the original Steinway Hall in New York, when I think I was 15 or 14. And then I made my debut in Paris at Salle Courtauld at like the same time. And I also played at like Interlaken. So I kind of almost had like performances that were, you know, quasi-professional even in high school. So I was already juggling that as a teenager and had actually shifted. I also studied with two other amazing teachers in the Chicago area, Theodore Edel, who was on faculty at University of Illinois at Chicago. And he's actually a Juilliard grad. So there was sort of like that Juilliard lineage. And then with Vladimir Leachkis, both Emilio and Vladimir have passed on, but they were incredible inspirations to me. And Vladimir actually is kind of my conduit to the Russian tradition because he studied with Heinrich Neuhaus, who taught Gilels and Richter. So through him, you know, he taught me a lot about like harmony, and he would bring in all of these recordings that were kind of obscure, and it would be like Sofrenitsky playing Scriabin, and bringing me all these biographies, like the, you know, or memoirs, like Rubinstein's, Arthur Rubinstein did his like whatever, My Late Years or whatever, but he was really into kind of almost like sort of giving me a holistic big picture view of what it is to be a musician. So I would say all of those influences, the kind of competition experiences, the marvelous teachers that I had, and just my sort of personal affinity for the instrument. Like it provided such an anchor during my youth, and I'm really grateful because I think it didn't give me the sort of the insecurity that I missed prom. Like I actually played with an orchestra on, you know, the night of prom, and I was like, I don't care, you know, it's like, because this is what I love, you know. And so it really gave me a focus, and at the same time it also balanced out my sort of studies, and I just felt like I you know, was interested in a lot of things, but that music was always sort of my main love, if you will. So then obviously just quickly, then I went to Juilliard and met Greg there, and got my bachelor's and master's degrees at Juilliard. So like we were friends before we became a duo. So we actually, our first sort of forays playing together was accompanying each other. Like if we were working on concertos, like Greg would be like, oh, I'm working on Saint-Saëns second, like, can you accompany me? Or I'll be like, oh, I'm like working on Barber concerto or whatever. So we had that, but then it was our junior year that we put on a recital for chamber music credit, ostensibly. And we were like, let's put on a 2 piano recital because we get to hang out and just like play some stuff. And then that was such, you know, speaking of kind of landmark moments in life, that was such a pivotal moment because it was exhilarating, joyful, thrilling, kind of like this just unusual moment of synchronicity. Like that concert still remains so kind of poignant to us, and that it literally was because of that concert that we're a duo, because our teachers, I studied with Veda Kaplinski, and you know, I respect and admire her so much, and at my next lesson she was like, have you considered doing this like as, you know, for real? And I was like, ew, I just would never have thought about that.
That is so cool. And it's such a joy to be able to play with people that you really love, you know, and really enjoy being around. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of chamber music, I think, you know, because I was sort of serious in a piano trio. And since, you know, like in kind of my professional life, I play a lot of chamber music. I think like what's so important is that there is like both a musical and a personal chemistry, because, you know, you can put a bunch of top level musicians together, but sometimes it lacks that je ne sais quoi quality. And to me, that comes from the actual like personal vibes, you know, that you share. And so I think that's where Greg and I kind of lucked out, because it was both the friendship and our mission, our shared mission to make classical music a powerful and relevant force in society, that have been the through lines for this career. So it wasn't purely like, oh, musically, like we get along. Because actually we're, in a way, like, if you asked me 20 years ago, I don't know if I would have been like, yeah, Greg's going to be like my sort of professional colleague, you know, like, because we're just different pianists and we're different people. But sometimes you can't predict, you know, where you're just going to have that I don't know, where things coalesce in a kind of magical way.
Now, had you, before you had met Greg and started working with him, had you played with enough people that you knew that when you played that first recital together, that you were like, this is a special connection in multiple ways? Because I know that that's been the case for me. There haven't been that many musicians I've clicked with. And so, like, even when I first played with Sarah and Michelle, you know, and I actually kind of butted my nose into their little ensemble. And I'll never forget
You did not. That is a lie.
Yes, I did. Because I totally, like, they just hired me to play with them. And they were like, well, how much do we owe you? And I was like, how about you just let me be part of your group?
Yeah.
And crash. Because of that same thing. It's like, I just felt like, not just socially and music. I mean, it was just the whole package. And I felt
Of
like,
course.
I know you're not, you know, and we live in a small area. It's like, I can't let this go.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
like dating, you know, you're like, oh, like that's a good one, you know, like not gonna
Yeah.
not gonna take this for granted.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was kind of a combination of experience, but also innocence in the sense that you know, leading up to my Juilliard experience, I played chamber music on and off. And my, you know, in fact, my first piano duet experience was with my younger sister when we were literally the sisters with matching dresses. And it was kind of like, yeah, you know, it was fun, but it just like didn't take it seriously. So, and I remember I played Carnival of the Animals with someone in high school and it was fine, you know, like it wasn't like, oh my God, this is my future. But at Juilliard, my freshman and sophomore years, I was actually rather serious in a piano trio. So piano, violin, cello. We played like Schubert and Beethoven trios and Schoenfield, cafe music, and Shostakovich. You know, we kind of like did a lot of the traditional stuff, and we were actually pretty serious. We got second at Fischoff. So I actually like at the time was thinking like, oh, maybe this trio thing like has legs. And in a way, Erica, I feel like Greg was you because he saw, so I don't know if he'll even remember this. I remember it viscerally. It was sophomore year, my spring sort of trio recital. He was there and he saw, we played the Schoenfield Cafe music and the second movement is like kind of sultry. And of course it's become kind of a signature thing with us, but you know, like I was like getting all into it and Greg was like, oh yeah, like we are going to play together. Like I think he got motivated by like that moment. You know, he might not say that, but, and Greg is such a kind of fire starter. Like he sort of, you know, if he has an idea, like he'll pursue it. I think that's one of his strongest traits is that, you know, a lot of people, they dream about things and they just kind of like let it fade into the ether. He actually kind of will, you know, do the work to make it happen. So, you know, I would say that Greg, in a way, you know, us being friends, you know, people called us Will and Grace at Juilliard because we were kind of attached at the hip. So, you know, we always hung out. We were like Will and Grace, but like less catty. Like they fought all the time, you know, the show. Like that wasn't really us. But we basically like hung out all the time. And so that like sort of laid the groundwork for our partnership. But second of all, I think it was just the innocence of being like, oh, like let's play together. This is fun, you know. And then because he remembers, we sight read the Brahms Haydn variations, and if you know like the opening, it's very, you know, there's not a lot of leeway for the simultaneity of, you know, the quarter notes, and you know it's very like square in a way. And I don't remember like having any kind of expectation. I was just reading it and we were completely together, and Greg flipped out after like we read through the theme because he had played it before with other people, I don't know, and like said he struggled so much with that very piece. And so like I had no expectations. I was like, okay, like I'm just gonna like read this thing with you. But I think he had the foresight to be like, wow, like we have something. And so I think like it's kind of the combination of just like being at the right place at the right time, being open to kind of like having fun with our first recital. It had a lot of the ingredients of the things that we consider to be kind of Anderson and Roe signatures. So we, at Juilliard, they usually put up programs, like photocopies of the program that sort of precedes your concert. So you can like see like, oh, they're going to play, you know, Liszt Sonata, or they're going to play, you know, Gaspar or whatever. And so we were like, those are boring. So we like made our own signs, and we made different signs like for each piece in the program. So we were doing arts and crafts in my dorm room at like 2 a.m. with like colored markers and like designing all these posters. Like no one told us to do that. And then we like we'll put them all over, you know, the school. And then we also changed outfits literally for every piece. Like I would literally like change in like 20 seconds backstage. And then we don't do that. That's too hardcore. But like we also did this super fun version of Carnival of the Animals featuring Orion Weiss, who is a fantastic pianist, and he was our classmate at the time. And he did his own narrations of the carnival movements, and it was hilarious. He's like, and he actually didn't reveal what he was going to say ahead of time, so we were all like responding in real time, and we played it with an ensemble of our classmates, and so it was sort of like, move over, Ogden Nash, we got a new classic here. And so it just, I think all of those elements, because another thing to sort of kind of keep in mind is now in 2020, I think we have a different view. You look at like Ray Chen, or you look at, you know, there's Two Set Violin, or there's a lot of people out there like on Instagram and YouTube that are doing fun, almost like quasi like leaning toward crossover, but not quite, you know, but things that feel adventurous and a little bit more accessible. But that wasn't, you know, the case in 2002. Like, if anything, we were sort of like, we didn't have any template, but that was very freeing. And it was also freeing to do it together, because I think when you're a soloist, there's all these loaded expectations of like, oh, they need to be playing like everything by memory, or they need to be playing, you know, obviously that like is not even a thing anymore. So I think a lot of things have changed in classical music that, you know, we feel like we were proud to sort of be a part of that wave. And that includes even music videos. When we started making them in 2006, I mean, it was not a thing. And so that's why, you know, like I feel so blessed that we happen to kind of find each other, because I think even if our musical personalities weren't quite the same, it was more like the big picture mission and desire to just explore and to have fun with it, and to try things, and to do it with like your buddy, you know. So I think that those are sort of the foundational reasons that we're still playing together, you know, almost 2 decades later.
So awesome.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Thank you.
So I want to talk a little more about creativity. You've talked a lot about this. Obviously, you're a very creative person, and also inspiration, because the creativity has to be fed, you know. So you do have a lot of different forms of creativity. You guys do covers. When you were at Juilliard, you wrote your thesis about musical representations of different authors in literature.
Yes.
You mentioned changing costumes, so you wear these beautiful dresses when you perform. So you're pulling from a lot of different forms. And I was just curious about how that came to be. It seems like it's maybe something that you've just always loved, and they feed each other. But
yeah, thank you, Sarah. I actually love this question. I love the underlying concepts, because for me, from the beginning, even as a young teenager, when I thought about music, or even as a child, I've always looked at music within a larger context.
mm-hmm.
So for me, even like when I was making my college decisions, I was very torn whether to kind of go in a liberal arts sort of normal university direction, or to like go to conservatory. So I never was sort of that like tunnel vision, like I need to practice for 7 hours a day, and, you know, I need to like play fufale faster than anybody. Like that never drove me. And I think I have to give credit to, first of all, like the amazing women in my life. I think my mother is like still to this day the most effortlessly chic woman that I know. She's an artist. She always encouraged creativity. When I was like 2 or a toddler, she let me color on the walls with crayon, like Pollock style. Like, but there was a staircase, like kind of wall. So I mean, it wasn't like she was letting me go anywhere, but like she kind of like gave me that as my canvas. Like, how cool is that? Like, she was just like, yeah, just go express yourself. And I always remember from an early age, like, this sounds kind of superficial, but like watching like the Oscars, or like watching old movies, like loving Audrey Hepburn, or, you know, like, you know, Princess Diana, or, you know, it's like kind of these like glamorous, like larger than life figures, because in a way, like all of life is art, you know, art is life and life is art. And being influenced by great performers, you know, whether it's like, you know, an opera diva like Jessie Norman, or Renee Fleming, you know, who I've seen both of them live, and it's just like their presence, their stage presence is so like commanding, you know, and it's just like, I love seeing strong women in their element, even when they're like gentle, you know, and soft. But like, you know, like I'll love like Lady Gaga, and I love Beyonce. So it's like, to me, it's not just like Martha Argerich, who again, I worship, but it's not only the great women in sort of our classical tradition, but it's like the Martha Grahams and the, you know, I don't know, the pop divas and the like Meryl Streeps, and you know, it's like that there's kind of a through line of courage and like pushing boundaries, you know, like kind of, and also celebrating the fullness of womanhood. Like, what does it mean to be a woman? I think people want to categorize women and be like, oh, like you're only a mother, or like, oh, like, or like you're super aggressive businesswoman. It's like we contain multitudes, you know, and it's like, and that is the richness that we bring to our art and to like the way that we live, you know. Yeah. So it's like, I'm like all about it. So and I think it's like, that's also, you know, credit to my older sister. She was also sort of my source of inspiration for, like, she was always into kind of literature and poetry, and she got her doctorate in French literature. So like I learned a lot of kind of stuff about like French culture, like both of us are Anglophiles. And so, you know, like learning about that stuff, which kind of led to my love for literature. And that's why I wrote my thesis about that, because I love words and there's a musicality to language. But, you know, it all kind of goes back to the sense that music is not divorced from other aspects of life, and that music, the things that actually I'm most sensitive to in any kind of creative art form is that it touches upon something that transcends your sort of academic understanding of it. So basically, like, you know, it's like the feeling we get when we watch like a great movie, or the feeling that we get when we like see the most, you know, I don't know, like transcendent like dancer, or when we're sitting in a museum and just like gazing upon a painting, that it's like you can, I mean, it helps to have like maybe some intellectual understanding, but ultimately it's like, what are the feelings and the resonance that is emotional or psychological or even like spiritual that it kind of evokes. And so that's like all, I've always been sort of sensitive to that. Like I've always loved kind of like, I remember I played the Liebestod, like I first learned that as a teenager, and I had not actually, I hadn't started dating anyone, but I kind of was able to already intuit like the feeling of like heartbreak and yearning and something like tragic. And so like, in a way, I don't really believe in being method. I think that like we all have the capacity to sort of dream and to feel empathy and to wonder and to imagine. And it's like that kind of sensibility is overarching with anything that I do, like on my own or with Greg or with my other colleagues. And then the other kind of through line I would say is this idea of connection. I'm actually like very much an introvert, and I like enjoy solitude and actually find a lot of creativity in that space. But I also think one of the blessings of being a performing artist is that we are connecting all the time with people. And, you know, ever since my Juilliard experience, I have been engaged in sort of like community engagement. I was part of Ensemble Connect, which is Carnegie Hall's sort of post-grad fellowship. I was part of the first class. And so I was teaching at a public school in Queens for 2 years and playing, you know, concerts in a lot of community venues, like not just concert halls, with my colleagues. And again, like being a member of Dakota, we do work in, you know, hospitals like during COVID, but my colleagues have also, you know, done projects with people in prisons. And, you know, it's like that we kind of, we're not just looking at classical music within this sort of rarefied elitist context. And so there's both like the kind of spiritual aesthetic inspirations, and that I also include style, because like you can still be a strong feminist and like, you know, want to just like present, like represent, you know? And so like, you know, that's all a part of it, but also the kind of the social connection and the almost the feeling that we can do a service for humanity through our art, and that in a way we even have the responsibility, I think, to lift others up, because there's just so much out there that just threatens to separate us and to bring us down. And I think that that's one of the most beautiful things about music, is that it, you know, it really does surpass boundaries, which, you know, that may sound cliche, but I believe it more than ever now.
Well, and that actually segues really nicely into what I wanted to ask next, which is again, so I recently, I think it was last October, I saw you in Greensboro, because I just can't get enough of you. And and that concert, because I've seen you perform many times now, but there was something about the second half of that performance that moved me. And I don't know if that was intentional that you put that second half together the way you did, but it was the Leonard Cohen Alleluia. It was a Beatles tune, Let It Be.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just all this music that, for me, I felt like was communicating something that went obviously beyond the music. It was like you and Greg were sharing a message of hope or something. And I was wondering if that was intentional. I know afterwards I kind of asked you about that because I think especially at that time there was a lot of stuff going on. This was even before COVID, obviously. But what I felt like was that helped to restore to me a feeling of the purpose of music.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much.
That goes beyond just, oh, yeah, I can play the piano well.
Yeah, thank you. I'm like, that means so much. And I don't know if, all people kind of received what we were sending out with such kind of insight and appreciations. That means so much to us.
No,
but
I would say I think they did. Just speaking as a member of the audience, like the other thing I was going to say is like you sang. Like that's the way. I mean,
the
you
karaoke.
Yeah, whatever. No, I know that. But like I would never feel comfortable sitting there and singing on stage in front of the audience. But I think the minute you did that too, it was like all the walls were broken down. And then I believe you had the audience sing with you, at least in the chorus, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Gotta take it to church.
But yeah, it was though. And that was just incredible.
Thank you so much. And again, this goes back with, it touches upon a few things. First of all, Greg and I share this mission to make this music that we play powerful and relevant in 21st century society. So whether or not, we want it to be sort of like front and center, but music and art is political. Like you don't have to sort of spell it out in bold font and capital letters, but in a sense, like how can we not respond even in very subtle ways to what's going on in the world around us? It's like I think a lot of people maybe want to look at classical music and look at it as this very precious artifact that's in this very precious museum. And you can, I know that some pieces feel absolutely, metaphysical and almost like beyond time and space. It's like if I'm listening to Bach or Messiaen, it's sort of like I don't care what's kind of going on outside of me or outside of this time that we live in. But otherwise, I think it's such a human thing to want to respond or to want to reconcile with or to want to like seek some sort of clarity or some way forward in this morass of confusion and discord that kind of surrounds us in our world. And it could even be like interpersonal, like you could be just having conflicts with people in your family or in your community. It's like it's just a very like universal thing. And so that also touches upon the programming. We're extremely intentional with our programs. The program should feel almost like it gives some kind of arc, like a psychological arc, or there's thematic links or things that kind of serve, like a central message, or it could like a lot of times what we do is like we'll have sort of a first half kind of through line, and then we'll have a sort of like a corollary or a contrast in the second half. So with that one, I think maybe there was a lot of darkness and intensity in the first half. I think we had the Brahms Sonata, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. So the second half was a little bit like redemption and like moving toward the light. And it's not only like but it can't sort of merely be intellectual. It also kind of has to be visceral. So that's why we do program a lot of our arrangements, because we know exactly like kind of what our intention is with those arrangements. And then sort of in terms of the kind of multifarious things that we program, that's been one of our kindred qualities, like as a partnership. Both of us, we are not specialists. A lot of our friends specialize in new music or specialize in like, oh, I play like, the classical composers really well. Like we kind of like love everything, like we'll play Renaissance stuff, we'll play like new stuff, it's all like a grab bag of amazingness. And that also kind of is reflected in the programming. Greg actually is like, I feel like he's sort of an encyclopedia for like kind of obscure piano works or something. Like I don't know, the works of like Stenham or like composers you wouldn't like really think of. And I'm as sort of the pop resource because like I'm still, you know, like, of course I love my Beatles and I love, you know, the kind of the tried and true, but, you know, I also like, I love, you know, kind of indie bands, or like I listen to Billie Eilish, or, you know, it's like I've kind of like always have my pulse on what's going on. And so, you know, or jazz or hip hop or, you know, it's Radiohead, you know, it's like all that stuff kind of gets folded into, because we like ultimately, you know, great music is great music. And I think maybe if you're a purist, you kind of want to categorize it. But back in the day of like Liszt, he was taking the tunes of the time from operas and from folk music and refashioning it and reimagining it. So in a sense, we aren't innovative. We're actually almost like a throwback to like, you know, the 19th century romantics. Like I always joke that if we had past lives, it's like, you know, we would have lived in sort of that mid 1800s, because I like we feel sort of a lot of affinity with the way that they presented music and received music. And so yeah, but thank you so much. That's always our hope, is that it kind of conveys all of those elements in a single concert.
Well, you do it.
Thank
Definitely.
you.
So along with your duo, I mean, you have different irons in the fire simultaneously, right? You perform solo and you've recorded several albums, and your most recent being John Field's Nocturnes. So do you enjoy the recording process, and how is playing solo different from, I guess preparing your solo work is different than preparing for your duo? Like, how do you balance all of that? Your solo playing versus duo playing and recording?
That's a really excellent question, and I'm still figuring it out. I mean, in a sense, I feel like it's impossible to do things 100% all at once. You know, that's another thing that I'm discovering during this time in quarantine, is that there's sometimes like, I guess, seasons to life, you know, and that at least when I started off as, you know, like in that pre-college, college vein, I was very much committed to being a solo artist and, you know, being at Juilliard as a solo pianist. And so it remains clearly a passion of mine, not only because, you know, the repertoire is so magnificent. I mean, like the piano concerto rep alone is like, you could spend a whole lifetime working on. But also I still enjoy the autonomy, the independence, and the sense that, you know, you could create something complete all on by your own, you know, on your own. And I think that is extremely freeing, and I still love doing it. And so the recordings are in a way like almost like receptacles of my kind of my passions or my sort of interests at the time. And yeah, you mentioned the Field album, which I have right here. But this one, this actually is like one of my favorite memories, because I had to go out to the English countryside, which was like so fun for me. It was like it was actually in Britton County, which connects to another album. I did the Britton and Barber piano concertos, and on that disc, I recorded the only nocturne. So Britton wrote a nocturne for piano, and Barber wrote a nocturne for piano. And Barber's nocturne is called Homage to John Field. So the producer at Decca was like, oh, have you ever thought about, or would you be interested in recording the complete Field nocturnes? Because I guess he enjoyed those nocturnes. And I was like, yes, because actually I had played a couple of them in college. So it was sort of like, it felt like a nice way to revisit these somewhat underappreciated pieces of music. I know that they were the sources of inspiration for Chopin's legendary nocturnes, and they are really beautiful and exquisite portraits of night music. And so, you know, that recording experience was great. In terms of balance and, you know, balancing of time, you know, in recent seasons, it's been, I would say, like 80% duo, you know, and almost like 20% chamber music and solo. So it's really gotten kind of lopsided toward the duo genre, which again, like I am grateful that we have the amount of opportunities that we do, and that we really are sort of maybe striking a chord with our audiences. So, you know, I'm not necessarily lamenting the fact that I can't spend more time on solo music, but again, time is sort of the essence. And when you are on tour with a duo partner, with a duo program, and we're juggling multiple programs, it sort of leaves all the solo stuff by the wayside. But especially during this time in quarantine, I've been revisiting solo music on our Portland concerts. We actually did each a solo set on both nights, which is nice because it's the most obvious way to share live music. And it's wonderful because, again, like my tastes are so widespread. You know, it's like I want to play, you know, more Beethoven because it's a Beethoven year, but I also, you know, wanted to take the opportunity to learn an etude that my friend Ryan Francis wrote for me, you know, that I never got to perform up until that point. And so, you know, I haven't quite figured it out yet, but my hope is that, you know, when the time is right, you know, maybe if it makes sense to take a break from the duo, or even just kind of to like if life moves me in a direction where I can focus more on chamber music or solo music, then I will take that turn. And, you know, I think both of us are always open to the waves of inspiration and the shifts in life. And I think it's a sort of a comforting thought, you know, that in a way, like, music is enough for a lifetime, but a lifetime is enough for music. So it's like I'll never run out of things to want to work on, and I will always be passionate about solo music, and playing solo piano concertos is like my favorite thing to do in the world. So I wish I got to do it more. But I also, you know that there might be sort of a time and place for me to shift the focus. And in a way now is kind of a little microcosm of that. Like I actually feel like I'm getting to play more solo music, and it's been such a joy and really fulfilling.
You have performed all over the world. You've mentioned this, and it must come with some good stories and some good experiences. So do you have a favorite memory or story from your travels, or conversely, the opposite, that you want to share with us?
Yeah, I mean, I guess a lot of times touring is related to the places that you go. You know, a lot of people are like, wow, like you went to all these places and we literally saw the hotel room and the concert hall and maybe like a restaurant that was on the same street. But one of my favorite tours in recent years was we did a 10-city tour of New Zealand, both islands. And that was so much fun. Greg actually did his honeymoon in New Zealand several years earlier. So we had really like researched and mapped out, you know, the best places to go. And it was great because we had time in between the concerts to drive, you know, like, so we would be driving these bucolic, stunning roads, you know, it looks like you're in Lord of the Rings because that's where they filmed it, and listening to the Lord of the Rings soundtrack and seeing like more sheep than people. But it was just so fun because it felt like, oh, like, let's like stop by the side of the road and go on a hike, or let's, you know, stop in this beautiful restaurant that's like on the shore like by these kind of interesting boulders, but like they have excellent food, but it's like kind of off the beaten path, you know. It's just like things like that I normally wouldn't have the time for on a tour. And so that was beautiful because both of us love nature, we love food, we love like kind of like road trips because we just gossip and like listen to music, and you know, and so it was, and we switch off with the driving, and so that was super fun. And then another kind of epic month in my memory, this was I think 2011. I actually had some chamber music concerts at the Festspiele Mecklenburg-Vorpommern. It's in northern Germany. Daniel Hope, who's an amazing violinist, I think he's like artistic director there. So I was there with members of actually alumni of Ensemble Connect, but technically Dakota. And so we had done like kind of a mini, the festivals in different cities in northern Germany, and we stayed at this beautiful resort. It was like so beautiful, and it was on the shore of the Baltic. And I remember feeling like it was, I went there twice, but that time it was September, literally like around this time of year. And up there, like the sun, it just like, it's just so, because you're north, and so like the skies were so beautiful, and the sunrises and sunset, like I would like go to the beach, and then like I would go to like my little like practice studio and practice, and then I would like stroll in the woods. It was like I felt like I was in some German fairy tale, like, you know, like some soundtrack to some like Schubert lied. And then like we would all go like dine in this like amazing room, and then we would play these chamber music concerts, and like playing with like Daniel Hope, like Soldier's Tale, like just kind of freaking out because he's like, you know, a celebrity. And then, so that like took maybe about a week. And then I flew down to Rome and met up with Greg and his husband. And we did this amazing, we had almost kind of like a quasi vacation where we like drove through the Amalfi. We did a crazy day of sightseeing in Rome, and then we drove along the Amalfi Coast and like was just like eating pizza and like wine,
Beautiful.
and, like pasta.
It's like,
oh
man.
yeah, it's like, can we just like retire and go there? And then we drove across Puglia, which is like the southern part, and then played in basically played in a city that's in the heel of the boot, like the southeastern part of Italy. And it was amazing because it was actually on my birthday, and it was like the concert started maybe like 2 hours late or an hour and a half late, and like we were like freaking out because
that is on brand.
Yeah, like we were
on brand.
Like we were picked up at the hotel after the concert was supposed to begin, and like both of us, being American, we're like freaking out, like we're ready, like where are they? Then we get there and they're like, oh, like we're not ready yet, and then we're all just like waiting backstage, and then finally like we played the concert, and then they were all like excited, and then we went to this like post-concert dinner that like literally started at midnight, and like it was like 2 a.m. and we were just losing gas and steam. And then like these kids were there and these dogs, and they were like still running around, and it was crazy. But that was like such a memorable like little European jaunt where like I got to do like all my favorite things, but also like really soak up the local color. So that was really fun. So I would say like those are a couple of my favorite memories. But I mean, in terms of negative things, I've had fevers, I've had food poisoning. I've like definitely not been in optimal shape in several concerts. So that's always like, especially when COVID like was starting to hit, I was getting really paranoid with like, oh my God, trying to keep distance. And actually our last concerts, we were trying to avoid just shaking hands. And we did a good job of social distancing, but sometimes people would forget that, that was a thing. So so there was actually like a little sort of relief when things started getting canceled, because I was starting to get really nervous. Like, in early March, I was like, I don't know if this is actually safe, not only for us, but for our audiences to be that clustered together.
Yeah.
And there was a weird sort of transition period between everyone's wondering what's happening, what you should do, and then the directive to, okay,
just stop.
Yeah.
this is real, right? So we could talk about mental health, travel, performances for literally ever. This has been awesome.
You're such wonderful Actually, I've been talking too much, but you're wonderful interviewers.
That's so good, so good. Okay, so let's flip to grab bag. You get to choose one thing or the other. Not both.
Fire.
Just one. Yes.
Okay.
Let's go.
All right. So,
Do it.
mountains or beach?
Beach. I love mountains though.
What was that?
I do love mountains, but if I have to pick one, the beach.
Yeah, you get one.
Okay.
On
I think I know the answer to this, but coffee or tea?
Tea. Actually, I do love I like coffee, but I don't want to get hooked on it. So like for me, coffee is like literally a treat. So I don't drink it every day. Yeah, but tea, I drink literally. It's gonna be 90 degrees outside, and I'm drinking tea.
My type of girl.
Jeans or sweats?
I gotta say, despite like all of us wearing yoga pants every day, jeans, because it's just I miss wearing my jeans. I've been wearing sweats like this whole time.
Fair. Okay, so these questions you don't have to choose. They're more open-ended. But
Okay.
So what is a book that you've read that you could just read over and over and over again?
Ooh, this is a hard question because I have so many favorite books. I think I may have to say, because I love Jane Austen and the Brontes, but I may have to say A Room with a View by Ian Forster, because Lucy Honeychurch is my literary alter ego, and it takes place in Florence and in England, and it's just like romantic. It's beautiful. There's musical references in it, so yeah, and it's great. There's a great Merchant Ivory film, like adaptation.
Awesome.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah,
it's great. Helena Bonham Carter.
What is your favorite way to unwind and recharge?
Yeah, I'm going to be boring on that one. Probably like reading a book, just like, either reading a book, taking a nap, or like taking a walk. I'm unlike Greg, he's kind of a wild child. Like he'll go skydiving and, he'll go to like parties and stuff. Like I'm kind of like an old lady. Is in like a 30-something-year-old body. It's like, yeah, I'm content with like very docile activities.
That's very good. What is something that you would tell your teenage self?
Oh man. You know, I have to say that one of the humbling things about getting older, and obviously there's hopefully, knock wood, a lot longer to go, but is the realization that like of all the things I don't know. And sometimes I envy my younger self because that self felt like very motivated and focused and sort of able to accomplish things I set my mind to. But I do think, I realize that sometimes there's underneath that when you're a high achiever and you're ambitious is that there's sometimes like this like underlying thread of anxiety. So I think I would just tell myself like, take it easy. Things will unfold in the time that they're meant to. And that doesn't mean that like you don't set goals or that you don't work hard, but that, I think there's wisdom in sort of letting go, and there's a grace in that. So I would tell myself to maybe relax a little bit more. You'll be fine.
We have so enjoyed our time with you today. I've learned so much.
Oh my
I feel
gosh.
like I've been to therapy and back.
Yes. Thank you. Likewise.
So, on behalf of all of us, thank you for joining us today. It's been a treat, a pleasure, and a much needed breath of fresh air. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Oh my goodness. Thank you to you three magnificent ladies. I mean, I just feel blessed to have a sisterhood, not only in my life, but in the musical world, and what you're doing to uplift others and to champion others and to to support your communities in the work that you do individually and collectively is absolutely inspiring. And it is an honor to know all of you. So I hope that we'll get to actually interface in person when we're all on the other side of this pandemic.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank
Absolutely.
you so much.
Thank you.
We'll talk soon.